Hi there, my name is Nhyira Premium and welcome to this series on the fundamentals or basics of management accounting. Now when it comes to management accounting, as I always say, there are key areas that you have to focus on that I refer to as the fundamental areas. Now these fundamental areas set the basis or the tone for how you are going to treat the entire syllabus. So in this video, I'll be discussing with you one of the key areas of management accounting, and that is classification of cost. Classification of cost. Now, why is this important? This is very important because the way you understand how cost is classified will affect you when you are preparing the cost statement or the cost sheet or the cost card, and will also affect you when you are preparing the profit statement, either under the absorption costing, the marginal costing, or the activity-based costing. So this topic sets the basis for us to be able to understand how various things are treated under management accounting. So when we say a cost in a simple language, we will say it is the amount of expenditure that is incurred on an activity, an undertaking, or a process. Now when we say cost classification, then we are referring to what? The grouping of cost into various categories based on certain features. Now there are various ways through which cost can be classified. We can classify cost like into what we call controllable cost and then uncontrollable cost. Usually, controllable costs, as the name suggests, are costs that can be influenced by the decisions of a manager or an individual or a supervisor. So a controllable cost is a cost that can be what? Influenced by the decision of an entity, a manager, or a supervisor. An uncontrollable cost, on the other hand, is a cost that cannot be substantially changed by what? The decision of a manager, an entity, or a supervisor. So yes, that is one way we can classify cost. We can also classify cost according into avoidable and then unavoidable cost. Meaning, avoidable costs are costs that an organization could avoid if it does not undertake what? An activity or an operation. But unavoidable cost is a cost that you will still incur whether you undertake the decision or not. So there are various ways through which costs can be classified. But aside the controllable, uncontrollable, avoidable, and unavoidable, there are other ones that we need to look at, which are the four areas which will set the tone for our discussion in this video. So the first one is classification of cost according to nature, right? Classification of cost according to nature or by nature. Now, classification of cost according to nature, it simply means the classification of cost according to the elements of cost. Listen to that carefully. Classification of cost according to nature simply means the classification of cost according to the elements of cost. Now, what are the elements of cost? There are three elements of cost. We have material cost, labor cost, and then expenses. So these are the three elements of cost. So what are material costs? Material costs are simply the cost of ingredients or raw materials or components that undergo the production process. Then labor cost is simply the cost incurred in the usage of human effort in the production of a product or in the rendering of a service. Then expenses are all other costs incurred apart from material cost and then labor cost. Alright, so the material cost is the cost of ingredients, right? If you're a furniture manufacturing company, or we are a furniture, then our material cost is going to be the wood we're going to buy, the nails we're going to be using, the anything that we're going to be using, the foam we'll be using, the material we'll be using on the furniture, and all of those things we'll be using for the furniture will be material. Then how much money we're going to incur on the carpenter and his apprentice on the furniture becomes the labor cost. Then any other cost we're going to be incurring, like electricity charges, like delivery costs, all of these things will be classified under what? Expenses. Now, when it comes to classification of costs according to nature, and we are talking about material cost, labor cost, and then expenses, we have to also understand that costs can further be divided into direct costs and then indirect costs. So what are direct costs? And then let's look at the differences between direct costs and indirect costs. One, direct costs can be traced or allocated to a particular cost center or cost unit. So direct costs can be traced or allocated to a particular cost center or cost unit, but indirect costs cannot be traced or allocated to a particular cost center or cost unit. Another difference we can talk about is that direct costs, the summation of all direct costs gives us prime cost, or the summation of all direct costs results into prime cost, while the summation of all indirect costs gives us overheads, right? So when we add direct material costs, direct labor costs, and direct expenses, that gives us prime cost. When we add indirect material costs, indirect labor costs, and indirect expenses, that gives us what? Overheads. Another difference we can say is that direct costs are usually controllable costs, whilst indirect costs are uncontrollable costs. Alright? So direct costs are controllable, whilst indirect costs are uncontrollable. Another difference that we can talk about also can be that direct cost takes a greater percentage of the total cost incurred by a company, whilst an indirect cost takes a less or small percentage of the total cost incurred by a company. So if I go back to my furniture illustration, what it means is that the wood we're going to be using, the nails we're going to be using, the materials, the fabrics we're going to be using, the foam we're going to be using on our furniture, depending on whatever we are building or whatever we are doing for a customer or a client, we are going to be incurring that material cost, right? And those material costs, we can segregate them into direct material and indirect material. Now, when we say direct material, meaning that the cost of material that can be traced to the furniture. In other words, at the end of the day, we can actually see this thing on the furniture that we are talking about. So certainly the wood is going to be a direct material, the foam is going to be a direct material, the cost of the fabric we're going to be using is also going to be a direct material. Then if we are talking about indirect material in such circumstance, then we can talk about issues in relation to maybe the oil or the grease that we use on the material. It could be an indirect material, but depending on the circumstance that we are talking about. When it comes to labor also, the cost of the carpenter can be traced, or the amount of money we are incurring on the carpenter, the remuneration of the carpenters can be traced to the job, right? So the cost of the carpenter becomes what? The direct cost. But then how much money we pay to the carpenters' apprentices, then that becomes indirect cost, because the apprentices will be engaged in a lot of things. They may be asked to cut something, they may be asked to go and buy food, they may be asked to do other various activities of the organization. So that is also what you need to understand when we talk about the issue about labor cost. So this is what you need to understand about the first thing, classification of cost according to nature. In the next video, we will look at function and then the other ones. So keep watching and remember to comment below with your questions.